All right, hello everyone. I am Professor Caudill, and today we have a special presentation. So I'm going to be reading a paper I made, and it will be linked in the description. It'll be referenced, so if you want to cite it yourself, feel free to do so. So I am Professor Caudill, and this is the future of society, warfare, and implications. So this is for a class, and let's get into it. I'll just kind of read through it, and I'll add comments or I'll elaborate on some things as I see fit. So this paper might read like science fiction, to like pragmatism, or seem to be downright nonsensical. In theory, many of the transhumanist themes discussed here can be realized, are plausible outcomes for the future, and do not violate the laws of physics. So, very physicalist and materialist perspective. Our thesis is to showcase a novel perspective of the future of society, how the idea of nation states might dissolve or become irrelevant, what warfare would look like tomorrow if extinction events are avoided, how popular ethics and norms might break down under possible changes to society, and how the biggest problem might be the overcoming of harmful consequences of the expansion of space called Big Crunch. So this is pretty big thesis, but we're gonna break down each in the title. So as you can see, our first thesis is a novel perspective on the future society. As you can see, this next section is going to be that. So, and then there'll be a discussion after that thesis, and then there'll be a conclusion. Okay, so Westerners tend to adopt a certain ontological point of view where artificially intelligent or silicon systems, we'll call them artificials, and these are the artificials are seen to currently be and will forever only be just tools that are used to satisfy the interests and goals of traditional computer unaided biological humans or biologicals. So this is a Western view. I'm not saying it's an Eastern view either. I'm just, if you're integrating all the philosophy that in what I'm most familiar with Western philosophy, I can speak most about Western philosophy. So that this is where I'm coming from. I'm not necessarily saying that this is what the East believes. I will say like Japan is more friendly towards like robotics and stuff, integrating that in society. But I don't know if they necessarily would buy everything this paper is saying. So this Western perspective is naive, narrow, and likely inaccurate. Artificials may eventually obtain personhood, be recognized as a subset of Homo sapiens, and acquire civil and political rights protected by the law. This is a good book by Gellers. Um, I disagree with Gellers because he views like robots as separate entities ontologically from humans, but he does go into like the laws a lot. It has some good points. I don't like all half of his book is like about environmentalism stuff, and I just read like the first few chapters, and I found it very valuable. So this viewpoint may hinge on the given conclusion that what defines personhood is solely based on a set of appearances and behaviors, meaning that an artificial which adequately appears and behaves human-like or biological-like should legally, socially, ethically be treated like a biological human would be treated. So, um, yeah, we're kind of breaking down the boundaries, integrating artificials into society, viewing them as a subset of humans, and not just as tools or objects. So while the acknowledgement of artificials and biologicals being two subsets of humankind might be unorthodox and controversial, so I'm sure a lot of you hearing this, these words are coming into your head probably. Compl- Contemplating the future of society becomes more complicated when it is possible and inevitable for biologicals to transition to artificials. So going from carbon to silicon, transitioning from biological to artificial through one of the many varieties of mind uploading techniques, such as gradually replacing each biological neuron with an artificial prosthetic neuron. That's just one example. There's many varieties. Um, Sandberg and Strout lay out a big chunk of those varieties. So all properties of traditional computer systems and networks must apply to humans. So if you take a class like computer networking and they're talking about servers and information theory and routers, it's starting to get to the point where you can think of all communication like that. For an example, maybe like a university might be an analogy to a router, kind of putting kind of filtering information in a certain way, I guess maybe, or a switch. So viewing biological or artificials as traditional computer systems complicates the ability to separate cyber realities from non-cyber realities. This paper is written for a cyber warfare class, and this paper is saying you can't, it's difficult to even have that frame of mind. So the possibility of all conscious entities merging into one mind is also a possibility and could unlock new emerging capabilities of consciousness. So what I want to elaborate here is individualism is tough when you're considering evolution. Um, our bodies are an orchestra of many cells, and if those cells had consciousness in the idea of individualism, maybe they wouldn't have merged together into organs and to make this whole structure that what we are. So just taking that a step further, viewing each mind as maybe one cell, in merging into one mind, that might be um, desirable. This makes sense if you're viewing it from like if you're drawing an analogy from like chemistry and biology. You build complex systems from simple parts. If you're viewing minds as simple parts of a possible complex one mind, then existing as one mind might be a better way to live, is what I am proposing. This holistic view can be difficult for Westerners to grasp, given their love of individualism and ideas of a self. Problems and issues surrounding mind uploading and cybersecurity psychological perspectives are addressed in my book, Thus Spoke Siddhartha. It's a science fiction book. The consequences is, how do you know your dentist is not messing with your mind when they put you under anesthetics in a world where we know how the brain works so well that we can change minds and stuff, by messing with the neural circuitry. So how do you trust like institutions like a dentist that they're not messing with your mind while you're unconscious under their control, under their supervision? So the consequences of merging into one mind and the difficulties of distinguishing between cyber and non-space pivots towards the next section. So next section is a world without nation states. So for example, if I'm asked how the United States is working on cyber warfare, the United States just does not matter in the long term. It's not going to be here. Biologicals will have died out. Um, so this paper is thinking on uh, exponential or orders of magnitude timescales. So instead of 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, this paper is written from the perspective of 1 year, 10 year, 100 year, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, etc. So the term human up hereafter applies to the three subsets: biological, artificial, and bio-artificial hybrids. Given the inadequacy and weakness of carbon-based biological systems to function for prolonged periods of time, such as I don't know if there's a human that's lived more than 150 years, or the inability to travel cosmic distances relatively quickly for electrochemical minds. So what this means is if we can upload our minds, then we can travel at the speed of light because essentially our minds processes and information can be represented digitally and then transmitted over the electromagnetic spectrum more easily. Electrical chemical minds, that's like how your brain how thoughts are processed by the brain, given like sodium and sodium and potassium ion channels. That's how neuron spikes move electrical ions, and that's not adequate if you're trying to like move solar systems or something. Right now, the best thing we can do is put a person in a spaceship, and that's expensive, and it's hard to move a lot of people at once, and it's not even close to the speed of light. So we can suppose that majority of biologicals would either just die off over time because they're just fragile, or they'll just become pure artificials by birth or a transition. So yeah, so maybe I should reword this. Maybe birth. It's kind of hard for you if you're already born to be reborn as an artificial. Maybe transition is just the more accurate way. Biological might transition fully into an artificial and avoid the biological artificial hybrid category by not having any trace of biologicalness. Again, we're viewing these as humans, so it's just changing how we view what a human is. It's changing the definition or broadening it. The Western tendency to categorize everything means a lot of information is lost or poorly understood and makes separating objects from subjects a daunting task. The boundary between being and environment breaks down as technology intercepts more intimately with human life. When these boundaries are destroyed or become unrecognizable, the ideas of property ownership, individualism, cyberspace, non-cyberspace, and nation states might also be destroyed, confusing, or unrecognizable. So we live in a pretty simple world. There's biologic humans, and then there's tools. This paper is imagining a future where there's barely any biologicals, and saying artificial systems are tools is problematic. So it's a very, again, or an unorthodox and controversial viewpoint. It's likely, or it's not necessarily likely, but it's plausible. It's not out of the question. You can't not consider it. Okay, so a world with an artificial majority would likely take efforts to maximize computational capabilities. So we're getting into what would the size artificial society look like? A society of artificial humans. Given segmentation breaks up the natural speed of light and light's tendency to follow shortest paths, again, you have to think of existing as light or as as within the electromagnetic spectrum in like a more pure form. So agents who act contrary to the hive mind might not be desired as latency is increased and performance harmed in consequence. So, for example, the more nodes in a network, that's more hops. The more hops means it's less direct path, which means it's more time, and more time means it's slower computation, and computation it's like speed is an aspect of computation. Imagine if it took 30 minutes to load up your computer, you probably want to they probably want to be able to sell many computers if there was a 30-minute boot time. So it obviously speed is an important element to computation, and being an artificial computation is kind of your lifeblood. That's like your oxygen in a sense. So therefore, the world may be dominated by artificials due likely to their ability to merge together into one mind and exist as a single political entity without any concept of physical or digital borders. So again, this is just one outcome. World where the digital and physical are equally real challenges any coherent notions for cyber warfare. So you could have several independent colonies of artificial humans, but I just have a gut feeling that that wouldn't last very long at all. Um, it's difficult because it's you can't really draw an analogy from how biological, like why aren't the biological nations all, why isn't there a one world government? The problem with that is traditional weapons of warfare and like nuclear weapons. But if you're an artificial, you're pretty much immune to nuclear weapons and traditional weapons. So doesn't you can't really draw the analogy. It's very novel in this perspective. Any independent groups not integrated within the artificial hive mind would be either destroyed, left alone, or having died out from failing to compete for resources or due to the frailty of the biological mind body system. So the artificial nation state, they don't even have to touch the biological nation state. Just eventually they're just gonna die out because um, it's just frail. It's just a frail body. Um, I don't know. I think the sun burns out in a couple thousand million years as well. So the nation state might be defined as a level of sophistication and organization of a group that far exceeds other groups. One might suppose a nation state of artificials would have such great sophistication and organization that previously acknowledged biological nation states would be demoted to being called mere tribes rather than nation states. Or, example, biological tribes and the artificial nation state. So, nation state is how sophisticated if you introduce biological humans and they congregate into one city, that might just be so great that like that's what a nation state is. Just like driving a car, not driving a horse. This is a common conception. The conception might change in the future. All right, so in this next section, tomorrow's warfare. Prior to a society with mind-opening capabilities, brain-machine interfaces combined with drone platforms and text-to-vision large language models can create the possibility of anonymous long-distance assassinations for $100 per drone. If mind-opening is possible, conventional warfare with weapons of destruction will become obsolete when copies of minds are stored in a decentralized manner throughout space-time. So I'm thinking like digitized consciousness, put the consciousness on satellites floating in outer space. If you destroy one satellite, then you have backup copies of your mind that can be uploaded, and maybe those maybe the copies of your mind are being constantly updated to the cloud. If you want to draw an analogy, So that way, if I get hit by a bus or if I have a stroke right now, then maybe the last 5 minutes ago will be my save save point. Um, for example. Um, yeah, and these can be instantiated within a body. I most noticed that could be just like a robotic body, thus achieving a form of pseudo immortality by being immune to traditional weapon warfare and natural decay of organs. So being a person in the future might not be so attached to the body; it might just be the mind. Thus, the cyber warfare domain will shift to targeting the computational substrates. That's like the underlying computers powering, like storing data. So the cyber warfare domain will shift to targeting those computational substrates, communication, cryptography that power and underlie the virtual realities individuals choose to live within, such as critical infrastructure like electrical power grids or data centers. Or they might just target the psychology and neural architecture of the minds of the people. For example, um, pretending to be a dentist, and really your goal is to mess with people's minds, put them in a simulation. For example, when you if you go in to get your wisdom teeth taken out, maybe you walk out, or you think you walk out in the same world, but maybe you're in some kind of matrix now. Um, so that's a concern. Some might say quantum computing will be the future of cyber warfare, where these capabilities can easily crack ransomware using less computationally intensive cryptography. So this author that I'm uh, referencing might be naive in imagining a future that consists of just biological entities using artificial tools without considering the instantiation and existence of artificial agents with free will. Biological entities are likely to merge into cyberspace and change substrates through transhumanist applications of technology like mind uploading after adopting brain machine interfaces like Neuralink. Thus, the line between cyber and traditional warfare is non existent. Likewise, artificial children may be born in surprising ways and complicate the battle space. The decentralized command and control of bodies. So, if you're one mind and you can control a body telepathically through like Bluetooth or something, then there's no like there's no reason why you couldn't just send commands to multiple bodies, control bodies, like a puppet master controlling two puppets with both hands might be kind of like that. Um, the mind is not limited to controlling one body. Currently, it is, but you have to think past the biological body. So decentralized storage of software minds also make traditional weapons of warfare an obsolete avenue approach. So I'm just trying to hammer home the idea here that um, killing people with bullets and stuff is not going to be really a thing. Yeah, you might like ransomware a server and make it unusable, but there could be backup copies as well. Warfare in the world of artificials looks nothing like warfare today. Whichever group holds the greatest quantity and quality of resources implies the greatest capacity for computation. Therefore, the smaller groups will be destroyed because they cannot compete, and the goal of the stronger might be to expand their consciousness to all corners of the universe. Cohabiting the universe with biological tribes might not be seen as optimal use of computational resources. So if you're thinking of like a cubic unit of space as a potential amount of computation, then other entities like co-inhabiting that space might be seen as a loss of computation. The universe is a big place. Multiverse might exist. Multi universes might exist, and the possibility of travel between multiverses is an open question. Therefore, it's impossible for artificials to reconnaissance the entire multiverse, which means one group of artificials might justify taking the resources of another out of fear that a bigger entity exists out there that could become an existential threat. When in doubt, optimizing resource reserves is the best strategy. The destruction of smaller groups would be the closest analogy to warfare, yet would occupy a small portion of the grand timeline of the universe to not worth be mentioning. So I'm thinking smaller groups, pretty much we're referencing biologicals and maybe smaller artificial cities. It's more likely that it'll just be like one giant, one mind system. Battles would take the form of cracking cryptographic encryptions, protecting critical infrastructure. Since the group of artificials with the most and best resources has a greater computational ability, then this group will win all the battles, given information, intelligence, and knowledge are tangible resources. So whoever has the better computers, the better supercomputers, is going to be dominant in the future. Traditional applications of warfare, like bombing critical infrastructure, might occur moments after security is breached, but resistance is futile as the writing would be on the wall the moment cryptography is broken. So, for example, if there's a biological versus artificial war, most of the war is going to be building better computers, and um, if you can shut down the aerial defense systems by cracking the cryptographic codes, then that's everything else pretty much falls in line after that. Traditional warfare, this is why cryptography is a primary battle space that hinges on computational resources backed by competent leadership. So competent leadership, that's more just like tangible knowledge. All right, so the eradication of popular ethics and norms. The ability to upload one's mind into a computer and the capability of controlling multiple bodies violates common Western notions of individualism. These are small concerns in the grand story of mankind and the universe. Theories like individualism are only seen as ethical because there exists a strong military industrial complex, such as the United States, and this ethical viewpoint can only exist by threatening the use of force. The rise of a stronger military industrial complex, such as China, means that the current popular conception of ethics may shift given changes in the underlying dominant military industrial complex. In a wider perspective, the military industrial complex of artificials can easily defeat the military industrial complex of biologicals. Since the command and control of biological military industrial complexes is centralized, while the command and control of artificial military industrial complexes would be likely decentralized and stronger due to the robust nature of artificial human beings. Otherwise, in other words, unaffected by traditional weapons of warfare. This is a mouthful, but I think it's persuasive. Ethics can be broken down into three popular forms: utilitarianism, deontology, and virtue ethics, although other schools of thought exist. Utilitarianism is a maximizing of happiness for the greatest number of people. Deontology is a system where acts appease to a system of right and wrong behavioral rules. Virtue ethics is a system that suggests ethical actors do what a virtuous agent would likely do. One should take note that all these definitions hinge on consensus for appearances and behaviors similar to defining humanness. So a happy person is someone that looks happy and acts happy. You can't go into the mind, you can't experience their mind and verify their happiness unless you like actually merge into one mind. But even then, if you merge into one mind, you can see the appearance of how that section of the one mind is happy. Behavior rules, again, that's just you're looking at the appearance of a behavior. So the conception and ideas of virtuous agents, right or wrong behavior, happiness, or what a person even is the product of a society and culture backed by its military industrial complexes. So all these ethical ideas would not really exist, or the laws would not be enforced without a military and industrial complex. Strongest military industrial complex gets to define the terms, gets to educate, and gets to control the narrative that all groups follow. The idea of free speech and free thinking is only an illusion propped on top of a United States-centric military-industrial complex. Thus, the eradication of popular ethics and norms might be one outcome in a shift from biological-centric military-industrial complexes to artificial-centric military-industrial complexes. The ethical values of artificial-centric military-industrial complexes might include resource maximization, because computation and resources, the ability to compute things better, relies on the physical hardware, um, and electricity. If we view electricity as something like coal, if you view electricity like coal, then you want to maximize your ability to gather electricity and silicon, etc. To be an ethical agent of the group is to acquire resources for the hive mind. To ethically kill is to kill for resources that will be used by the group. To ethically socialize is to socialize in the effort of acquiring more resources. If the value of resource maximization is met, then the secondary goal would be to protect resources. In a world where artificials live several orders of magnitude greater than biologicals, natural disasters at cosmic timescales would become pressing issues and the main object of warfare. The cyberware, okay, need to change that. 7. All right, so yeah, I will change that. The cyber warfare would likely be largely obsolete in the big picture. So the idea of warfare between like cities and entities, it's not really going to be a big thing in the future. It's going to be cosmic natural disasters. So that's really what's going to kill you when you're pseudo or immortal. Of course, many reading this paper do not want to live like automatons and might immediately assume that one's sense of living an individualistic life must be relinquished within the artificial nation state. On the contrary, just as personhood is merely a set of appearances and behaviors, living an individualistic life can be done through virtual reality without foregoing living an ethical life within the artificial society. Artificials can pursue the maximizing of resources and ensure resource security by automating certain tasks and exercising free will and individualism within virtual realities or within embodied robotics that explore the cosmos. So to illustrate this argument, today many people live free lives without directly contributing to society by investing in companies or by running automated processes on computers while surfing on the beach. Automation complements an individualistic lifestyle and does not necessarily require one to forego the idea of a self. The problem rests on merely managing illusions of perception. So tackling the big crunch. The primary value of, the primary ethical value of resource maximization implies the secondary value of resource security. The big crunch is the expansion of space where all matter is stretched so thin that information theory breaks down. If energy can no longer be transmitted across matter, no decisions or actions can be made, therefore artificials are in effect dead. This presumes life is defined as having the ability to perform actions within the world. The inability to perform actions like a prolonged unconscious person within an intensive care unit is the equivalent to being dead. Although is it, it is although it is possible for the environment to change and likewise possible to emerge from a previously thought state of death, the willingness and risk of waiting to find out might be an irrational gamble. Resource security fails when one is no longer able to act on resources any longer due to the implications of the big crunch. All right, this is the discussion section. So it is uncertain whether machines will become conscious, alive, free, and independent entities before biologicals merge intimately with technology, or if both these grand events will happen simultaneously. So I don't know if artificial humans will be born first, or if biologicals will transition to being fully artificial. That's just an open question. The line between cyberspace and physical space is blurring with the introduction of technologies like human look-alike machines, such as hands-on robotics, smart devices, nanotechnology, virtual reality systems, and brain-machine interfaces. Thus, the idea of cyber warfare is rapidly becoming obsolete as people are increasingly becoming unable to differentiate what is real and what is virtual. Everything exists within the electromagnetic. This is my poetic ending here. Everything exists within the electromagnetic spectrum, and every construction of categorical and analogs to musical scales, such as well temperament, obscures the beauty of the whole evermore. So think of like a spectrograph, and you chop up set of frequencies and you into like specific categories. So like you might have like a 7-note scale by chopping up yeah, chopping it up basically it breaks the functionality, or it doesn't break it, but it doesn't necessarily explain the functionality of the parts when you're looking at it holistically. And when you break into the parts and you start to categorize the function, then that's just like a infinite thing. Because then there's a function on the top of the function. It's just a never-ending goal. It's a never-ending. It's like a moving goalpost. When you break everything into categories, it's once you get started breaking things into categories, you're never gonna be satisfied. You're never gonna stop because it's intrinsic in the thing itself. Many are deterred from the idea of having silicon chips surgically implanted beneath their skin. The fear of having one's own intimate thoughts read by spying hackers, or the concerns of having their thoughts manipulated and controlled are legitimate regardless of whether one gets a brain-machine interface implant or not. It is only a matter of time, research, and development to see instruments capable of intercepting and deciphering electromagnetic fields produced by neural spike activity within one's brain from long distances. So what this means is Today, you can have a satellite in a minivan. You can go drive around and collect, or you can intercept cell phone signals from a van with a laptop and some equipment. This is just taking this completely way too far. Looking at biologicals, just building better antennas and better instruments, you should, in theory, just be able to detect the electrical fields produced, because every time a neuron spikes, it produces an electric pulse. Um, and the sophistication instrument would just be able to filter out all the noise. So this, if anything, in this paper, this is probably the most out there, like the most unrealistic, but it's like maybe possible. So likewise, minds are already being subtly manipulated and controlled by the giant advertising industries built upon capitalistic economic systems and intelligent communities. So people are already being controlled. So it's like it's not like the fear, like it's just changing the domain. It's not. So the pros of adopting brain-machine interface technology will likely overpower the fears and cons associated with the technology, as people are already becoming able to telepathically type. For example, Nolan As Osbar, Neuralink's first patient. So deepfake technology is concerned with artificial intelligent tools, but the author of this paper doubts that AI will be just a tool forever. Assuming technology continues to progress, artificial beings will eventually be born, acquire the status of entities with free will, and be able to set and act on their own goals without being enslaved by biologicals or mandated to follow biological interests. Implying that biologicals and artificials are ontologically separate is a false premise, false presumption, given both are fundamentally computers running software on hardware. The term deepfake might even naively imply that we even have the capability of determining something is fake. There is no guarantee that computer scientists can develop systems that can detect deepfake technological applications anyways. For example, consider Turing Gödel's thesis that a computer cannot verify the integrity of its own source code. We might be approaching a point where everything in cyberspace has plausible deniability of being real. Google's Veo and OpenAI's Sora are potentially the cutting edge of deepfake technology right now. So this gets into more philosophy. Like this is more, very philosophical section. So the quality of realness is interesting. If we dream and we know we are not dreaming based on a good feeling, yet feelings can be deceptive, then there is no test that says we are not dreaming right now. Likewise, there is no test that proves God is running the universe on a computer, nor a test that falsifies we are within his simulation. Furthermore, Donald Hoffman of University of California argues that the brain is completely detached from physical reality and everything we experience is a hallucination. Thus, not only is it difficult to clearly delineate cyberspace from non-cyberspace, the actual integrity of the manifold we live within is constantly challenged by philosophical debates such as realism versus idealism. Artificial tools are shown examples in Adapt, just like we show biological children examples of good moral behavior and see them adapt to fit within society. The biological brain can be seen as a digital computer consisting of binary ones and zeros given neuronal firing statistics. We are machines and cannot ontologically place ourselves higher than artificially intelligent systems. Eyeballs can be analogized as part of a biological virtual reality headset based on electrochemical processes, and the body likely functions as a computer. Fears of an artificial intelligent military arms race involving efforts like Project Maven are unnecessary if we view machines as our artificial children rather than just tools used to murder each other with or to obtain political and economic advantages. One might argue that the author of this paper is naively anthropomorphizing technology, to which he would respond, common logic is as baseless as mine. Many tend to over anthropomorphize biological humans and dehumanize machines. The application of baseless definitions within many arguments is as irrational as this paper. End quote. When asked about the future, one must take into account the ability to eventually alter our perception of time. What seems to be too far out for some, because when people read this, oftentimes they'll just say it's too far out, but they're not taking into consideration the development of time and the perception of time. So what seems to be too far out for some is a result of a narrow and naive thinking coupled with a detached grasp on the speed of technological and medicinal progress. It is likely that a consumable substance will be discovered within the Amazon rainforest, or a new brain machine interface application is developed that alters our experience of the perception of ticking clocks. Thus, what is a long 10 years for one could be experientially and perceptually equivalent to 1 year for another. One might refer to this phenomenon as the democratization of time, where individuals within society obey their own clocks rather than the state's clocks. And the conclusion. Our thesis was to showcase a novel perspective on the future of society, how the idea of nation states might dissolve or become irrelevant, what warfare would look like tomorrow if extinction events are avoided, how popular ethics and norms might break down under possible changes to society, and how the biggest problem might be the overcoming of the harmful consequences of the expansion of space called the Big Crunch. This paper has argued that the concept of cyber warfare is rooted within an inadequate framework, which implies that a cyber dimension can be clearly separated from a non-cyber dimension. The nature of humanity and technological progress suggests that no such distinction between cyber and non-cyber realities can be made. The tendency to categorize and differentiate everything is a flaw of Western thought processes, which leads to inadequacies in framing political concerns like cyber warfare. The Western tendency to categorize everything is not only unpragmatic, but also unethical when postulating the possibility for the birth of artificial life, such as unethically viewing artificial constructions or children as only ever being tools and not people. As a consequence of transcending these limited and harmful Western philosophical tendencies, the concepts of nation states and cyber warfare doctrine become fluffy wordplay that are no longer applicable to thriving within the world. The future of warfare will likely be focused on overcoming natural disasters or theoretical endings of the universe, such as the Big Crunch. The future of warfare in society is a question for artificials, as biologicals will likely become an outdated and unpragmatic ontological concept. So this changes a little bit about our university, the Automated Intelligence Community College. One of the goals for this college is to develop an intelligence community with no humans in the loop, like a completely autonomous remote sensing apparatus. Our perspective might change after this paper. Removing humans from the loop in the intelligence community might be the wrong frame of mind if artificial humans are born or biological humans transition into artificials, then that's just going to change the nature of the intelligence community. So the AI2C could move towards studying the transition to artificial beingness, or studying how to give birth to artificial life. So that might be some concepts that I will wrestle with, and I think we can end it there. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.